anyone and everyone can go in, learn about communities of interest, gerrymandering, and all of those terms. They can then give valuable testimony about their community. They map their community, and then they can send it in several formats to legislators, their local voting rights org, friends and family, and the rest, all 10 minutes or less. So today, I'm going to walk you through the website as an individual, and then as an organization who's using the website to gather community of interest maps in aggregate. And then we can open the floor for questions, and I'd love to hear how you guys would like to use the tool, and we could talk a bit about strategy and stuff like that. So with that, I will get started. Awesome. So here is the landing page. It's what you see when you type in www.representable.org. You click Get Started. And this is one of those orienting pages on our website because, as I previously mentioned, we want somebody with no previous knowledge of reapportionment or gerrymandering to be able to use the site to its fullest potential. Here, users are learning that they're coming to the website to map their community and identify its shared interests so that public officials can take their community's concerns into account. We then introduce the problem. It's gerrymandering, and we give a brief definition. It's when politicians split up or pack together communities into districts that silence their voices. If users want to learn more, they can click this handy dandy video, which talks more about reapportionment, gerrymandering, communities of interest, and how Representable can help. With that, they click Add My Community. And then they select their state. I'm going to map my community in Georgia for y'all, so you can see just how you can gather rich testimony through our tool. But every state has the state page. It explains what is redistricting, how it works in said state, how Representable can help, and then it gives some redistricting criteria. It's a brief overview, but if people want to learn more, they can click the link to their state constitution. We do a quick skim here, and we see that Georgia must consider communities of interest when they are redrawing the maps. Lastly, people see a definition for communities of interest. Some states are pretty specific, my state is not. Here we learn that a community of interest is typically a population that shares cultural, historical, or economic interests. And then lastly, before they get started, they can see community maps drawn in Georgia. Every state has this state page. Here we see that some students in Georgia Tech have actually drawn their community of interest. You can zoom in and people can see what other people are saying in their state. So now that users know what is a community of interest, why am I even here today, what are other people saying in my state, they themselves are ready to start mapping. So they'll click the bottom here. We just stop users to sign up and make an account to cut down on illegitimate submissions. It's just an email and password and that's it. I have an account, so I'm just gonna. And step one of the mapping process. We have some identifying information that we tend to collect before people start mapping, but we explain that we're not selling or sharing anyone's data, once again, just to cut down on illegitimate submissions. But when you create a community mapping drive for your organization to collect maps in aggregate, you have the option to not collect home addresses if you're working with a population who doesn't feel comfortable sharing that information. But for our purposes right now, I'm just going to put in my address. And then step two, once again, orienting users, what you're about to do is tell us about what unites your community. We then give the definition of a community of interest again, and we're augmenting it with some examples. Your community of interest can include your neighborhood or where you live, the people you want to choose representatives with, or a local group that is brought together by a common interest. With that, people begin to talk about their community. It's one of the best parts of Representable because in this testimony portion, we're not just leaving users out into the wind. You know, what can you say about your community? It's where you live. There's so much testimony that you could give. So we break it into 4 silos. And then under each silo, we have prompting questions, examples, and example testimony. So for the sake of time, I'm going to just go ahead and put in some answers I've previously written. In terms of community activities and services, where do people gather to socialize? How and where does your community access services? Stonecrest Mall is where most people gather on the weekends. I live right outside Atlanta. It used to be a bit unsafe, but now there is increased police presence and the new mall rules have been implemented as well. So the area is also turned around with the economic recession being in the back view mirror. Additionally, church is a centerpiece of my community. We live in the Bible Belt. I get very specific here. I say Beulah Missionary Baptist Church and New Birth provide food, childcare, and some forms of healthcare. And then lastly, speaking of healthcare, in times of emergency, most people go to DeKalb Medical Center. I didn't write it down, but it's also important to my community because a lot of us were born there. So that's cool. Cultural or historical interests, what are the cultural bonds of your community? What's the shared history? I keep this pretty brief. I say my community is predominantly Black, though in recent years, after our city, Lithonia, was split into two, Lithonia and Stonecrest, there has been an influx of new non-Black residents. Economic or environmental interests, where are residents employed? If there are environmental concerns, what are they? I talk about how my community struggles with unemployment. However, most people do work in the city. However, there is a weak public transportation system. And here I get specific again. I say that there's a park and ride on Canola Road, but no buses around our neighborhoods to take us there. It's a common problem and something that binds us together. It's something that everyone can relate to in my community. And then lastly, a lot of people work at Stonecrest Mall. For teenagers, a lot of us had our first jobs there. And then lastly, community needs and concerns, keeping it pretty broad. What should politicians or map drawers know about your community? What are the needs of your community? Or just say your piece. Some organizations take this last box and they tell people to specifically speak on redistricting, like this example testimony where they say that their farming community extends over 2 counties, but they think they should be in a single state Senate district. I kind of do the both routes of talking about a policy issue and redistricting. I say that education is really important to my community, yet the schools have been on the failing list for a very long time. My community mobilized around this issue of education, showing that it's important to all of us, it's a common value. When the state considered a takeover or subverting of school boards a few years ago. So this was the first time I saw people writing op-eds, going to town halls. People really cared about the issue. And as a result, I think we need to be in a single state Senate district so that one person can fight for our children. So hopefully you can see how on this page, you can really get to know what people are worried about, what people care about, how this can relate to redistricting and future advocacy efforts in the future, if you so choose. Afterwards, users go on to name their community. I'll name it Michaela's Home. I don't know how to spell my own name. And they're ready to start mapping. So on this page, we're just letting people know that you're mapping with census block groups. Every state except for Oklahoma and Illinois will have 2020 census block groups because the geographies were released a few weeks ago. Those 2 states, our partners, told us that it would be more beneficial for them to have 2010 census block geographies. So that's why. To get started, individual users will start with a zip code, an address, or a landmark. I'm going to start with the zip code. It'll zoom right in. I actually think I clicked the wrong. No, that's correct. Yeah, I selected Decatur. This is Lithonia, great. All right, before you get started, you can notice how this kind of is akin to Google Maps. You see a lot of names here. Since we're seeing the Sears and the Dillards, we landed right on top of Stonecrest Mall, which I talked about a lot in my testimony. So I'm going to select that census block group. Before I go even further, it's just important to know that if you want to go back and see your testimony, you can look at it here. If you don't have a Michaela helping you through the mapping process, you can click the question mark and you can have this handy dandy video and FAQ to guide you through the process. This widget in the top right corner is selection tool size. So right now I'm just selecting one census block group at a time, but I can select multiple. I can also erase and then undo action, like that. So now I'm going to keep mapping. I definitely want to get all of this Stonecrest Mall area because I talked about it a lot in my testimony. Just at a glance, I see DeKalb Medical. That's the hospital that I said was a centerpiece of my community. So I'm just going to get the surrounding areas because these are the people who are going to go to DeKalb Medical. They're not going to go to Grady Hospital. That's inside of the perimeter. I'm going to keep going west because here I see the street name Panola Road. So that's where the park and ride is going to be. Another thing I talked about in my testimony. So get that surrounding area because these are the people who are also taking the park and ride like me. And then lastly, I talked about education. So I know I want to make sure that the schools and my school district are within my community of interest. I'll just type in one, we'll do the high school. In Lithonia, no, I misspelled it. There we go, snap finger. So it's right over here. I'm going to make my way to these census block groups so that the high school is encompassed. Now I'm going to zoom out. It does span 2 cities, but I'm not concerned by that because Lithonia and Stonecrest used to be the same city until 2017, I think. If anyone asks you, well, what don't I include into my community of interest? For example, I don't include the nature preserve because it's not that important. It doesn't bring my, in my opinion, it does not bring my community together. In my opinion, a lot of people don't hang out there or gather there. You don't go to events, for example. I don't want to get too close to the perimeter because in my opinion, those people who live within the perimeter have access to different services. You would use the train, for example, rather than take a bus if you live inside of the perimeter of the city of Atlanta. So just some examples to get people thinking. But I'm pretty happy with my community of interest, so I'm going to go ahead and save. This is the last step of the mapping process, just letting people know that you're going to submit your map to Representable, but we're not going to sell or share your data. You cannot edit communities once you save them. What you can do is create another community and delete this old one. And you can access all of your communities under my account. In my communities, there's no limit to the amount of communities that you can make. And then lastly, you click the reCAPTCHA. And you're done, congrats. So we're very action-oriented here at Representable. We tell people, now you can do something with the map you just made. You can export your map as a PDF, and that PDF will also have your testimony. You can send it to your local redistricting organization, your redistricting commission, if you have one, like in Colorado or Virginia, for example, or you can send it to your legislator. And if you click this link here, you can find out who that is. You can export your map as a GeoJSON file, the industry standard for mapping, which means you can upload your community of interest into Maptitude, Dave's redistricting app, District R, Esri, and more. And then lastly, you can send your community of interest map and your testimony as an email to friends, families, and colleagues. So you are automatically sent a confirmation email with this information once you submit your COI. And then lastly, on this map page, you have some more options to export your map over here. You have your testimony under these boxes. You have the data layers here. We're uploading demographics as soon as the new census data comes out because we're using 2020 census geographies and there is no 2020 census data. So when that information becomes available, we'll put that into the system. But what is available is data layers. So you can see your community of interest in conversation with congressional districts. Let's see state Senate districts. So you can see how many times it intersects counties and school districts even. And then lastly, you can submit your community of interest to an organization. Right now, I see that Lifting Georgia's Voices and State Voices have community mapping drives, and I could send my map to them if I so choose. And that is how an individual uses Representable. I'm just going to check the chat for some questions. We're all good. So now I'm just going to hop on over and show you how an organization can use Representable. Of course, now some big truck is outside of my dorm room. I apologize. But yeah, so right now, this is the organization dashboard. When you click this button here, which will say partner with us on our website, if you were to go right now, you'll just put in some quick information and you'll get your own organization dashboard such as this. You'll give a description for your organization and everyone will be able to see this. So make sure it's a good description. You can add admins. There's no limit to the amount of admins that you can add. Just keep in mind that these are the people who will be able to see the community of interest information that is submitted to you. And then lastly, you will want to create a community mapping drive. It'll look like this. You'll give it a description, the state it will operate in, and then you will be given this unique link. And this is the link that you will send to everyone who you want to receive a map from. Those people will click on the link and see a page like this. It's essentially a condensed version of the user flow I just walked you through. People who click on your unique link will learn what is representable, see the description for your community mapping drive and the name. They will learn then about redistricting in your state, and then they will draw their community. Once they draw their community, you can see all of the communities on one page right here. It'll zoom in. You can see what people said about their community and hop over to the other communities that were submitted to you as well. There are a lot of communities in a small space, so we'll hop over to North Carolina. Let's see, there we go. They'll be opaque like this, and you can see the highlighted ones and the testimony given. Lastly, you can export all of these maps as a GeoJSON file or CSV, and you can see all of these maps in conversation with the same data layers as before, such as state Senate districts and state House districts. We do tell organizations, though, that Representable is currently not what you use for doing deep level analysis of the communities of interest sent to you. It's going to be your main tool for gathering COI testimony and information from the average Joe off the street, and then exporting that information into Maptitude, for example. When you export your communities of interest into Maptitude, you can then, for example, build a district map based on the COI testimony and COI geographies that you have. But there are a lot of different uses for Representable. We have partners, for example, who are using it for youth homelessness advocacy initiatives, and then others who are going to simply post these maps so that people can start a conversation on community needs and concerns within their neighborhood, and et cetera. Some last cool features that we have is that Representable is translated into Spanish, and we're working on Arabic translations. Hmong translations will be available by the end of May, and then the next language that we're working towards is Mandarin Chinese. Representable is available on your tablet and your smartphone, so you don't need to have a computer. And then lastly, if you would like to see another demo, for example, or see some of our educational materials, you can click the Resources tab under Learn More. And there we have the educational video, demo video, which is what I just essentially walked you through, one pager, the organization guide, community mapping event PowerPoints. It's your one-stop shop for everything Representable, and we'll be updating this page as new features come out. So that is about it. And I would love to hear questions, comments, or concerns.
Awesome. If Michaela, is there like an email folks can reach out to if they have any questions afterwards?
Yeah, so feel free to reach out to us at team@representable.org, and I'll put that in the chat. Cool. Or you can reach out to me directly at msdaniel@princeton.edu.
Awesome. And then we did have a question about census data timelines. I can very briefly answer that. We just got the apportionment counts, and we believe the census data will be out at the end of September. The legacy file should be out sometime in mid-August, they're hoping. And so that's the most I can give you at the moment. This is information, unfortunately, that they've very limited given us. And we have one more question.
Yes, those data layers that I was showing are from the current districts that are in place, and we'll be updating them as they are updated in the current redistricting cycle.
Yeah. And if we don't have any other questions, this recording again will be available on the training website. And if anyone had questions or suggestions for topics for future trainings, please feel free to reach out to us at info@redistrictingdatahub.org, or you can reach out to me at angel@redistrictingdatahub.org. Just one word in front of the @redistrictingdatahub. But yes, we have one more question. Block.
When you say block data, do you mean the census geographies or the census data, like the population data? Oh, the census data won't be available until towards the end of the year. I think it is September. That's what they said. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you again, Michaela, for leading this. Have a wonderful Monday, everyone.